This week on the Communicators, a discussion on how legislative efforts in Washington, D.C. affect the technology industry in Silicon Valley. Our guest is Representative Mike Honda of California.
Mike Honda's Silicon Valley Congressional District is home to several well-known technology companies, including Apple, Intel, and eBay. And the fifth-term congressman is our guest this week on the Communicators. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Joining here in the questioning is Steve Wildstrom of Business Week. He's the Technology and You columnist. Congressman Honda, if I could start with a question about your constituents, these high-tech companies. When you talk to them about public policy or legislation, what are the concerns that they bring to you?
In the beginning, when I first ran, and it's kind of humorous, the folks from high tech said, politicians just stay out of our way, make our lives more complicated. But over time, the partnership has developed where they come and say, we like your consideration, think about tax credits extension or permanent tax credits, things like H-1B. And when they take polls among themselves on an annual basis, usually it's education that comes to the top of their list consistently. And I think that this year when they did some of that, the economy came to the top. So, but we get together as groups, and many times the troika, I call it, so Zoe, Anna, and myself, we meet together.
Congresswoman Lofgren and Congresswoman Eshoo.
Right, thank you.
And
Yeah.
you meet in what?
And we meet as a group, and we meet with the leadership in Silicon Valley, and we listen to some of their concerns. And a lot of times they'll get a response from us and some of our concerns in those areas too. So it's a nice exchange, and I think that the high-tech community, in terms of lobbying and letting their needs known, is they're relatively new in this whole thing, but very, very influential and impactful.
Yeah, how much have you seen the activities of these companies stepped up in Washington? I know, for example, Google, which is not quite in your district, just outside, has gone in the last couple of years from nothing to a very substantial Washington office. Is that a fairly general pattern that you're seeing more presence in Washington, not just in the district?
Yeah, I think a lot of them realize that the policies that are created here need the input of those who will be impacted by it. So rather than them staying there and hoping for the best, they come here and educate us. A lot of times when I first started public policy, I call the lobbyists or the people who represent the other interests, I call them the third house. And that from them I expect information, accurate information and feedback. And I think that they know that this is important. You know, Google, eBay, they all come up here and talk to us.
Congressman Honda, you mentioned some specific issues that they address with you. Let's begin with tax credits. In general, what are some of the issues that the technology companies have with tax credits, and what would they like to see legislative-wise?
Well, many of them would like to see some predictability, and they have they make quite a bit of investment in new equipment, and they like to be able to figure out how they're going to be able to take advantage of tax credits. So with high tech, they're looking at, and I think Congress is prepared to look at permanent tax credits where we don't have to mess with it all the time and every year. It gives them some sense of predictability. This past weekend I met with Applied Materials, and they're a local group that they design and construct machinery that creates the items that we need and different gadgets that we have, like they make the machine that creates the waffles for the silicone chips. And now it's getting to the nano size, and they're saying we need to have these tax credits, we need these kinds of considerations, and we want to be able to do this so that the other companies can buy our equipment, and then they can create their piece for our gadgets at a greater rate so that it drives the costs down. So there's a lot of synergy and connectivity in terms of what they do and how we end up benefiting from it as far as using our iPods and everything else like that.
Do you find that Congress is amenable to their concerns and to your concerns about tax credits?
I think when we listen and we understand what it is that they're saying, we usually agree, and especially if it's very, very basic stuff that they need to have in terms of being able to predict their own future.
You also mentioned the H-1B visas. This is always a controversial subject, and in a time of high unemployment, it is a more controversial subject than it has been in the past. Obviously, a lot of the companies in the Valley depend very heavily on H-1B visas, and they say, I think they say honestly, that if they can't bring people in, they will send work out to countries where they can employ the engineers and computer scientists they need. What do you see in this environment, this economic environment, as a prospect for the whole H-1B program?
I see the H-1B program as part and parcel of what we call the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Package. I think they would like to move forward and pull it out and move forward on it. But I think that if we want to look at a comprehensive look, we need to put it all together and do it in a package that will impact our community, our country as a whole. Individually, the program itself has evolved from just a simple, recruiting people from other countries to work here at a level that commensurate to the activities they want to accomplish, and many times they're cheaper too. And I think that that's created some antagonism or some concern among those who have been laid off, who have been working for companies for a while. And I think that we need to be sensitive about that. And those who are using the H-1B, the folks who are the holders of the visas, we've also learned that we need to work with them in order for them to have portability if the job terminates or they can move around, and also extend to them, I think, the possibility of becoming permanent residents too. So I think that it's a necessary thing. The problem is we have to understand that you can't overuse it either. And but I think in their purview, in their vision, it's still not enough slots for them.
Now, the H-1B is for the highly skilled worker.
That's correct.
Why is there a need for a large amount of highly skilled workers from overseas?
They're not only in high tech, they could be in other areas, but in Silicon Valley, there's basically highly skilled people in technology and science and math. And there's a lack of a lot of folks who have those skills at an immediate level, and so that they're requesting that. And it's short term in terms of longevity. It's 3 years, two cycles of 3 years, and so that sort of fits into how people look at creating generations of technology, and so that provides the companies that flexibility of having a workforce, and then when you don't need them, they can be released and returned to the country. Being a humanist and a teacher, I like to think that we could do better and not just use them and cast them off as, dispensable workforce.
In the context of more general immigration reform, do you see a prospect for getting some sort of a skills-based visa program, beyond it, for permanent visas into the U.S. system? Right now, it doesn't really exist except under very special circumstances. Athletes somehow can get into the country on special skills, but say computer scientists or mathematicians can't.
Yeah, and I think that the evolution of the concept of the H-1B visas can be extended and be considered a pretty fertile area that we can look at to extend and make it even more permanent for those who qualify for it. Next to that would be graduate students and scholars who could come over here through our immigration process also. In the last few years, that's been pretty tight, and I think we've been losing because of that. And having said that, I think, and this is just my own opinion, when we look at companies moving, there should be that exercise of looking at, do we really need to move, or have we really looked at ourselves in a way that we could become more efficient in how we use our floor space? Selectron had done that, and they found sufficient square footage going through this process so that they didn't have to move. And so employing different mechanisms to determine whether you should move or not shouldn't be only based upon is it cheaper labor out there, because I think that we've come to a point where cheaper labor is not the only issue that a company would look at.
So I know a number of Valley companies are ending up with sort of satellite engineering operations in Canada simply because it's easier to get, for their people to get visas into Canada than it is to the United States.
And the language is not a
Yeah,
issue.
same language. So you have people from India living in Canada, which they probably don't like the weather very much. I'm sure they'd be happier in the valley, but
It's more space.
Canada is where they can get visas. So that's where they go.
Well, to build on Steve Wildstrom's question, Congressman, is it because of our education system that we're not supplying enough special skilled workers for these tech companies? And does it contribute to overseas employment rather than U.S. employment?
Well, I don't think that our educational system should be the scapegoat of this kind of a problem. It's a challenge that we need more folks who are skilled in these areas, and we address that problem, that challenge, globally. And if we're going to be a global community, then I think that looking at other countries makes a lot of sense. Having said that, I think our public education system can be more supported and more engaged and be given the resources that they need in order for us to have teachers who are prepared to teach to the young people and create that kind of interest among the young people. A lot of people say that we're not creating enough of them, but when you really look at families and generations, usually the first generation folks are the ones that really push their kids into technology or things that, rely upon your own personal skills. That'll be doctors, lawyers, dentists, engineers, where the technical skills are more important, and you can be marketable in that way. And as the generations goes on, like in the Asian American community, a lot of our parents are wringing their hands and saying, "You're not going to be an accountant. You're not going to be a doctor or a lawyer. What are you going to be?" He says, "Oh, we want to be a singer, actor." Their visions become more expansive, and I think that that's a natural evolution. The new generations of newcomers are the ones that usually look at that. And in my case, one son's an aerospace engineer. He got in front of a Macintosh. I put him in front of a Macintosh. Says, "You can read, son. You're on your own." In 2 years, I was asking him how to put together stuff. And my daughter, she's very skilled in that, but she went into public health. But they all both enjoy music and everything else. But I think it's the way we evolved and the kinds of choices we give our kids. The people overseas, China and India, they're graduating hundreds of thousands of technologists. But not all of them are the kinds that we have here that give us the edge. They're civil engineers, structural engineers, the things that address their country's need for growth. And then I think the cream of the crop a lot of times come over here to further their education and also further their own life. And so I think we get our share of their brain trust.
Well, you're a former science teacher, several years, 30 years or so in the education system, and you introduced recently an Education Act to improve science and math education. What is that?
It's called eSTEM, Enhancing Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. What we found when we looked at all the eSTEM, the STEM programs, we found that there's a little over $3 billion worth of grants and projects out there, none of which are coordinated. And the thought was if we coordinated it, have them collaborate and communicate with each other, and have someone responsible for that information, teachers may be able to access the information, benefit from the outcomes of these STEM projects. And, but right now, it doesn't appear that that's possible. So it's linking all these different silos and then having a Deputy Secretary of Education whose sole responsibility is making sure that these things are moving at a national level and being provided. It's like being a Library of Congress for STEM. And then at the presidential office level, move that up to a committee level rather than subcommittee level where they will be meeting with the president and administration more frequently. And then using things like technologies like Google where teachers can access that kind of information. And it's not adding anything, it's consolidating and making sense of those things that we've invested in.
Now, No Child Left Behind is up for reauthorization. Actually, it was up for reauthorization last year and nothing happened. What changes would you like to see made in No Child Left Behind to promote education, particularly STEM education?
Yeah, I think No Child Left Behind, if that were a parent, it was more like an authoritarian parent where you really wanted to succeed in spite of everything else and be seen as successful. And what happens is sometimes we forget about the child that we didn't want to leave behind. And so the focus is not on the child anymore, it's on testing and everything else. What I like to see change is that the emphasis is brought back to individual child's growth so that you have a longitudinal tracking of that child to see that growth. You can do that within the year, within a month, or over time, and I think over time will give us that information. The way we do it right now, we test third grade, that cohort goes on, and then we test the next third grade. There's no connection to that other group, so you don't know whether there's been growth or not. The other thing I'd like to see is have it in such a way that the incentives is about growth and is about good teaching and not about being fearful of the stick, so that people will start to understand that while you're teaching to higher standards in these areas that are being that you're going to be accountable for, that the full curricula is engaged and that you don't compartmentalize the instructions so that this is the only thing that's important to the detriment of the rest. And in education, we want our students to be well-rounded and end up being a critical thinker and a critical consumer of our goods. There's one thing in No Child Left Behind that has to leave. That's something that was slipped in by a congressman who's now a senator, and that is the military recruitment. They slipped that in there where they said that if a military recruiter comes into a school and asks for information for the purpose of recruitment and interviewing kids who are under 18 or that they would have to be given that information or run the risk of losing federal funds. And that needs to be taken out, because what it's done is taken away the authority of a parent to share information of their minor child.
This is the Communicators program. We're talking with Congressman Mike Honda, who represents much of Silicon Valley. Steve Wildstrom of Business Week is joining in the question. Congressman, when we first started talking, we were talking about some of the concerns that the technology companies bring to you as their congressman.
Sure.
You mentioned the economy. What are the technology companies telling you about the current economic situation and what they would like to see done to resolve it that would benefit them?
Well, one of the things we've done is the tax credit, but what they're looking at is more investment in for the growth and stimulation of these renewable energy sector and in the nano technology areas and the fusion of physical and biological sciences where that kind of reinforcement and support is needed. And in the area of biogenetics and things like that, that's where they would like to see more emphasis placed, because in the past those areas were zeroed out in the budget. And given that, it would help them grow their company and take their research into commercialization and being able to provide that for either for commercial use. And I think that that's the big push. And making things policies where it'll be easier for cities and counties and institutions to be able to move to be more green. And I think that they understand melding what they do to the effort of educating our community regarding the carbon footprint. How do we work all together in doing this? Congress and our leadership is very much engaged in putting together a cap and trade mechanism. I think there's some who would like to talk more about carbon tax. And for myself, I like to hear the debate on both sides, because I think, really it would be helpful if we had a full discussion, full dialogue on that. But I think we're moving down the path of cap and trade, much like what Europe has been doing.
Well, as you know, several industries have had federal funds given to them to help them support them through this economic crisis. Sure. Do you see or foresee federal funds to technology companies?
In terms of?
In terms of supporting them through an economic crisis?
Yeah, I think that's what we spent, I think, close to $153 billion in the area of what we call the green area, where we're encouraging green collar work. Community colleges are engaged in that, and I think that some of those folks are doing some amazing things where they're taking technology and creating a new way of educating themselves, getting information out, and thereby creating new jobs too. And I met with De Anza College students. There must have been 300 of them from different arenas, and they were very interested in what's happening in high tech and will there be jobs in this new arena. And I just told them, I wish I were their age again, because it's going to be really exciting. When you look at the scale that you can look at now, molecular to engaging and melding all the different sciences together to do something new, and from addressing stem cell research to looking at things like regenerating nerves so that people who are paralyzed or can't walk can start to walk, cancer research where you can get down to that molecular level and seek out things that you can't find using even the technology we have today. So I think there's plenty of things out there that we can do, and all kinds of jobs that we can create.
Now, I know you're not responsible for the state politics of California, but
I've been there once.
Yeah, well, you left that behind. There's been a sort of endless, ongoing budget crisis in California. Temporarily, I guess, resolved, but certainly not. The underlying problems have not gone away. How serious an impact has that had on business in your district?
Let me go back a little bit. It's from what I've observed and learned, when we don't do the right things at the federal level, the state, county, municipal level activities become harmed. And I think that we need to be mindful of what we do here at the national level and the federal level, policy-wise. And when we talk about revenue and taxation and things like that, if we do it right, they benefit. What's that saying? If we sneeze, they get pneumonia. And it's really true. And that's why they end up, with budgets that need to be balanced and they have to cut where we don't have to do that. And I think that that connect needs to be constant in people in the citizens' mind that the demand that we do things right here will be beneficial at the lower level. Having said that, I think there's other factors like in California. I think term limits hurt us. I think the full deployment of Prop 13 has hurt us. Not saying that there's good things about Prop 13, it's just that I think it's time to go back and revisit that. Protect those who need protection. That was the original objective of Prop 13. But look at how you realign some of the flow of revenues to schools and just local entities. We have to be a little bit more astute and better stewards on how we manage the cash. It's not, I don't think that we're cash poor. It's how it's being managed. And if you look at local entities, cities, schools, counties, even states, there's an increase, a large increase in fees. We don't call them taxes, we call them fees now, to replace the kinds of things that should have been there, and that was there before. And it's really put our state and our country in a position where infrastructure is going to hurt. Our concern about those who need help are going to be diminished. And so our safety net is being frayed, our infrastructure is stretched. And so we really need to look at that. And it's an issue of equity. I mean, if I pay X amount of dollars for property tax and my neighbor pays maybe 4 or 5 times more for the same services, this issue of equity, and we need to readdress that and find out how we do that. But it's going to take political will, a lot of courage and leadership to do this. But then we're worth it, we're worth it.
Congressman Honda, Silicon Valley kind of grew up as an entrepreneurial venture capitalist Wild West, I guess it might be fair to say. How do you as a legislator encourage that spirit, or do you think that's your role?
I think it's our role to understand the dynamics that exist there. When I first got into public policy, I made a trip to China to develop the Hsinchu County in Taiwan, Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley sister county relationship. And when I went to People's Republic, the question was, so how is Silicon Valley, how does that come about? And I usually tell them that, Silicon Valley, when they made me think about it, it's not a geography, it's a state of mind. It's how you look at each other and how you create synergy, and at some point then it becomes competition. But it's not cutthroat competition, it's kind of everybody helps each other on issues and science and information, and at a certain point, you're on your own in terms of commercializing the ideas. And we have university students, foreign students, a group of people who are willing to invest their money and their time, and they're risk takers. And I think that's probably the bottom line. They are risk takers because they believe in something that can happen that will make life easier or converge a lot of the technologies together to create something. And it's that sentiment, that spirit, I think, that exists in our area.
And how do you encourage that, or your role as a legislator in enhancing that?
Well, in terms of education, we look at issues like nanotech and try to have youngsters and teachers and schools really look at how did we get there and what is it that you need to continue that kind of thinking. And we need to teach our youngsters how to innovate. It's a teachable skill. One of the CEOs of Selectron said, I know you're doing a lot of things in education, but you have to understand it's innovation and creativity that makes the difference in this area. Teach innovation. And I think we can by looking at engineers and scientists who have a lot of patents and figure out who they are, how they perceive things. And you can teach that to children to be more creative, more thoughtful, think outside the box. And so in my field of education, that's where I like to sort of play.
Congressman Mike Honda represents much of Silicon Valley. Steve Wildstrom is with Business Week. He's the technology and you columnist. Thank you both for being on the Communicators.
Thank you.
Thank you.